All right, for this assignment, you should have completed a survey, a pets survey, and then you're also supposed to have downloaded the responses spreadsheet. So just to review here, there's a pet survey, and you're supposed to complete this. Do you have a pet? Yes or no? If you have a pet or pets, which pets do you have? Dog, cat, and you can choose more than one here or other, dog, cat, birds, or other. And what's your age? And where do you live, in a house or an apartment or other? Okay, and then you submit that form, and that's going into a responses spreadsheet. If you remember how Google Forms works, you can create a form, and the respondent fills in the form, and then you can create a spreadsheet from that automatically. And I have done that. So you are completing a survey about pets. And those are going into this form right here. Now, this is not the actual form, but one I created from the form. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to take that spreadsheet, the form, the actual form that has respondents, and you're going to create a copy of it. So you won't be working with the live form anymore, or the live spreadsheet. Let me back up. You're going to create a copy of the responses. So once you create a copy, you won't be working with the live responses anymore, the live spreadsheet. So new responses won't come in after you've copied that. So this is what I've got. I've got this pet survey. Here are the responses. Now, this one is not shared, but yours is shared until you make a copy, and then it's yours, and it's no longer shared with anybody. So you can make a copy of it, and it should look something like this. The very first thing I want you to do is go in here and click on the first row right here. And I like to do this in responses spreadsheets. I go to view, and I'm going to freeze, in this case, the first row, because that's where my headings are. So I'm going to click first row. And now if I scroll up or down, notice that this stays in place. And then I also like to do this on responses spreadsheets. Now I'm kind of compressed here, so I'm going to click the more button, but you'll because my screen, I made it a little smaller, so things are bigger in the recording here. But we're going to change the text wrap to make it wrap, so that when you see this, you can see the full question. Watch. So now you can kind of see, and you can see what the question is as you move up and down. Okay, so once you've done that, you should have a spreadsheet that looks like this. You've made a copy of it, you've done this to it, and you'll have a spreadsheet of the responses up to the point that you copied it. That your copy will have all the responses up to that point. And so you're working with your copy of the PETS survey responses. Okay, so I've added a few things at the bottom. Now remember, you may have more than 16 rows. You're likely to have more than 16 rows, because at the time I made this available to you guys, or the assignment to start, I already had 16 rows in there. So you're going to, as other classmates and other people complete the survey, there will be more responses. So right now there's 16, but when you do it, there are likely going to be many, many more. So you may have to scroll way down to see the stuff at the bottom. So I've created some things at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And like I said, it's many rows down. So you'll have to scroll, scroll, scroll to get down to it. But it's at the bottom. What next thing I want you to do on yours is to change data summary to data summary, and then put your name there. And then I'm going to talk about how I've created these formulas to get this information right here, this data. So what we've got is a database, or a spreadsheet, I should say, that asks respondents about their pets. Do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Do you have a bird, or do you have other? How old are you? And where do you live, in an apartment or in a house? And maybe we're curious about something. We want to do some analysis, a little bit of research here, because we kind of have this thought that maybe, I just wonder if older people have cats or older people have dogs, or younger people, do they have cats or they have dogs? I'm just curious about that. Let's just say. So it could be anything, but that's what we kind of designed. I've designed this for, to answer that question. Does it change? Does it vary very much by age, whether a person gets a cat or whether they get a dog? And maybe later, and not in this particular assignment, but maybe later, does it vary based upon whether or not they have an apartment or whether they have a house? Presumably, maybe a house has more yardage, and so a dog might be better there. Cats, I don't know. Cats might be better in an apartment, if you perhaps, because you don't have to take them out. You can You can, use a litter box, those kinds of things. But we don't know. But that's not really the question here. The main question I want to ask is, um, does this vary by age, whether you own a dog or not? And so I created a little table down here. I just went in here and typed in respondents who own. I clicked in number of respondents. I mean, I typed it in, average age of respondents, dogs, cats, and you should already have this. I've already created this for you. Now, you're going to be creating something down below that for the actual assignment. But I just wanted to run through all of this. So right here, I wanted to know how many people have responded. Now, yours may be much greater than 15, but how do we get that number? I'm going to double click on it, and you can see that I've typed in the count function, and we had this before. We discussed count and sum and max and min. I don't know if you remember all of that, but those are various functions that we can use to give us the count of how many items there are in a range of cells, or the sum of how many items there are in a range of cell, that sort of thing. So I'm counting everything from A2 through A17. Now, notice that I'm going to scroll up so you can see the whole range. It's A2 right here through A17. Notice I included the blank space beneath the last respondent. Now, yours will have changed. Yours will be different than mine because they'll have many more respondents. But because I included this last one, the blank space beneath it, any new responses will be included in the range, and the range will change. So it's really important that you always include the range past the last respondent. So this will count every item in A2 through A17. I should say every number that it finds in A2 through A17. There's another count function called count A that we could use, and it would actually count anything that's been entered, whether it's text or whether it's a number. Timestamps are actually entered as numbers. There is not text data. It's actually entered as a number. So counting the number of numbers in this range of cells is useful. It tells us really how many people have responded to our survey. So that's how you would get that formula, but that's already in for you. Let's do the next one. I'm going to click on how many respondents on pets. And this is what I wanted to kind of get into here. This we're using, we're going to count, but notice this is count if something is true. When we're talking about something called logical functions, a logical function when we're looking at logic generally depends on evaluating some condition. The condition has to be either true or false, typically, yes or no. So in this case, we're going to count how many items there are here. Okay, we're going to count how many items there are here. If in B2 through B17, uh, and we're only going to count those items if they are equal to this condition. If they are equal to yes, so we're going to count everything in B2 through B17. Notice B2 through B17. We're going to count how many items there are in there that meet this criteria of having be equal to yes. Now we can do other conditions. We can do greater than 10 or less than 12. That wouldn't make sense for a text-based item, but if we wanted to find out everybody over 45, we could do greater than 45 instead of equal to yes. So, but I've typed this in for you, so you should be able to click on it and see that. And so it shows that 13 of them answered yes. Hopefully that's correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I think. So yours will be the numbers. The numbers will be different on yours than on mine because more people will have presumably have responded to the survey by then. Okay, so you don't have to do anything with that. I was just demonstrating how to use count and how to use count if. Okay, a simple case. Now, what I'm kind of interested in is does the type of pet people own, does it vary by the age of the respondents? So first of all, I wanted to know how many people said they owned a dog. So let's double click this. I've got 8 people. Let me just read this for you. Let me make sure we can interpret this table. 8 people, it says, at this moment, have answered that they own a dog. 4 people said they own a cat. 3 people, a bird, and 5 said others. Now, presumably, you'll have more responses by the time you copy the spreadsheet. So these numbers will be bigger. And notice the average age of the respondents right now, 41. The average age is 41 for the dog owners, 30 for the cats, 30 for the birds. That just happens to be 30. That just happened to be that. And then 33 or other right now. So that's how we would read this table. Now let's figure out how we would produce this table, because after this, you're going to have to produce something similar. Well, let's take a look. How do we get this column? Just the number of respondents who answered dogs. Well, I'm going to double click on this, and you can see the formula when I double click on it. What I've done is I've used the count if function as I did here. But I wasn't just, in this case, I'm counting them if they own a dog. So there's two things. Remember, with every function, we always put in parentheses the items required for the function to function. In this case, there's two things the way this count if is working. We're going to take everything in the range C2 through C17. Notice, let me scroll up and you can see C2 through C17. Okay, which is down past the last one. And what we're looking for, and notice people have answered cats, birds, or other, or just cats. The way Google Forms puts this in, it just lists them if a person selected them. So that for this first person, they answered they had cat and birds. The next one said dog and bird, and so forth. So what we're trying to do is we're going to count it if it has the word dog in it. Now notice I've got in quote, you're going to do it exactly like this. There's two items, there's a range, and then there's what it is that has to be true or false for it to be counted in the count if. You're saying count this if in this range right here, it contains the word dog. So notice you have a range here, a comma. You have to have that comma to separate these two items out. And then this is the second item. And notice it has to be in quotes. And then notice how I did this. I didn't say equal to dog. I could have done that, but except that it wouldn't really work here because it's this particular one, for example, is not equal to dog. It's equal to dogs and birds. So what we want to do is use this little asterisk in front, and that just means anything can come before the D and anything can come after the G. We don't care. We're only going to count it though if it's got these characters DOG somewhere in this cell. So if you take a look at the very first one, it does not have the word DOG, the characters DOG. So the computer will say, well, it does not meet this criterion that I have here. So we will not include it in the count. Okay, and then we go to the next item in the range C2 through C17. Does it have the word dog? It does have it doesn't know it's a word, it just knows the characters D, O, and G are here. It's not case sensitive in this case, but you never know. So it's always good to make sure you type it in using, and it doesn't hurt to make it case sensitive. We know that the person who filled out this survey, when this person responded, they didn't type in DOG, so they didn't misspell it. They selected it from a list, and the computer put it in here. So we know this can't be misspelled. We know it's not going to be lowercase DOGS and so forth. So, but this is looking in the range C2 through C17 and only counting those items in that range that contain the characters DOG. And again, you put parentheses around the thing that the function needs to function. In this case, there's two items, and you can see this when you do the count if, you need the range and you need the criterion. Okay? All right, so that's how we've gotten this formula. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do I have a $C, $2, and $C, $17? Well, because if you recall, there's absolute versus relative cell referencing. And in this particular case, if I copy this cell somewhere else in the spreadsheet, I don't want this range to change. I want it to stay C2 through C17. Now remember, yours is going to be higher than C17. Yours might be C85 by the time all the respondents have come in and you've started this assignment. So this number is going to change based on how many respondents you have. But if I copy this somewhere else in the spreadsheet, I want it to stay that range. Okay. So if you notice, now the next question you might have is, why would I want to copy that anywhere, right? Well, I'm going to copy it down. Let me show you. I've actually got it fixed right here. Notice it's cat here. It's the same range, but it says cat. Here, it's the same range, but it says bird. Here, it's the same range, but it says other, right? Now, in order to create this, though, originally, I didn't have that. I wanted this formula to come down. So what I did was I copied this down. Do you see how I deleted those three? But originally, I just had this one after I finished this after I finished typing in the formula. So I'm going to drag the fill handle down, and notice it copied my formula. It says count it if it's dog, but it says C2 through C17. And the next one says the same thing, C2 through C17. If you copy something and you leave off the dollar symbols, watch what happens. Well, let me finish what I'm doing here. Okay, so on this one, I need to change this to cats, right? And now, why is that saying 0 cats? I'll have to figure that one out. C2 through C17. Cats. Maybe cat. Oh, I did it like you got to spell it exactly right. I did it cat, I think, right? It does. There's no place in these responses that has the word cat, C-A-T-S. It has the word C-A-T open parentheses. So there's no set of characters in this range of cells that has C-A-T-S. It's always C-A-T open parentheses. So back to here. So what I did was I copied this down and then I changed this to cats. And now I'm going to change this to not dog, but to birds. See how I'm doing? I'm using this over here. So I need to do BIRD. Remember, don't put the parentheses and spell it exactly right. If you don't spell it right, it won't work, right? And then lastly, I want to do other here. And so we're going to put the word other here. And so now you see why I copied this first. It's easier to do. So if I didn't do that, I'm going to take this out for just a second. I could have typed this in, right? C2 through C17. It works the same. It's the cell C2 through C17, C2 all the way down to C17. So that works. But if I copy this down, watch what happens. It's now the range C3. Whoop, sorry. It's now and for the cats, it's C3 through C18. And for birds, it's C4 through C19. And for other, it's C5 through C20 because this range changes as the formula is copied down. So this cell is in my case, is in B25. If I copy it down, one cell, I'm going to copy it down to here. It's going to go down one cell. So instead of C2, it's going to say C3. And instead of C17, it's going to say C18. So that's why we include the $C and the $2, which says don't change the C or the 2. And we put a $C and a 17 as well in front of the 17. So I'm going to undo all of that so you can go back to where we were. Okay, so I've got all these formulas in here for cat and dog and other. So we've got, in this case, we've got 28. I'm sorry, on row 28, it says there's 5 other. All right, now it's going to get a little tricky here. It's going to get a little bit more tricky here, but not terrible. We want to know the average age of the respondents. But in this case, I want to know the average age of the respondents who are dog owners, okay? So I can't just use the average function. If you remember, you could just average up the average age. In fact, I could do that right now. I could just come in here and I could say equal average. And then I could highlight the range, open parentheses, and let me get rid of that little thing. Average, I want to do all the way from here down through, remember, always get the item right behind the last one. So that's the average of D2 through D17. My average age is 33. Make sense? So that's the average function. I'm going to undo that and get rid of that because we don't need that right now. What I wanted is the average, but not the average of all of those. I want the average of just the dog owners. So let's look at how this formula is created. All right, this is the average if, not the average function, but average is. If, a reminder, just a second ago, we had count if right here. It would count the items. But in this case, we're going to average the items. But we're going to average the items only if a certain criteria is true. So in this case, C2 through C17, I've double clicked it so I can scroll up and you can see what's highlighted, is this. You see C2 through C17. So what we're doing here is this is the criterion for the range that we're going to look for the condition to be true or false. So we're going to look in the range C2 through C17. And if it's true that it contains DOG, if that's true for any particular cell, it will be included in the average. Okay, well, not that cell will be included, but actually a corresponding cell in D2 through D17. Because think about this for a second. You're not just averaging, you can't average C2 through C17. That doesn't make any sense because C2 through C17, those are words. You can't get the average of the word cats. You can't get the average. Those are words. You don't average words, you average numbers. So this is a column of numbers. So what we want to do here, if you notice, is this tells us which range to look in to see if a condition is true. And then average it, include it in the average. If this is true for that cell, look in this column for a corresponding the corresponding item to include in the average. So notice it's D2 through D17. So what this function is going to do, it's going to look at, first of all, it's going to look at in C2 through C17. So it's going to start with C2 and it's going to say, is that equal, or is it true that it contains a DOG? If it's true, then it will look over to the corresponding column in D2 through D17, the corresponding item in D2 through D17. So in this case, we're in row 2, and it is not a dog. So this condition right here, this criterion right here is not true. So we do not include the 16 in this particular item because it's not a dog. It doesn't have the dog in this cell. Now, how about this one? Well, look, if we go to the next one, right? We started at C2, but now we move to C3. Is the condition true? Does this cell, whoop, dang it, let me go back. I need to double click where it was. Okay, go back to where it was. So forget that just a second. So we're in the next row, the third row right here, right? And we're evaluating this condition. Is the value in this equal to a dog, or does it contain a DOG? The asterisk means, anything can come before the D, anything after the G, as long as it has DOG anywhere in it. Does it? Yes, it does. Look, this one does have the word dog, DOG, in it. So we're going to include this number in our average. So you see, it's average it if a cell in this range contains dog. What are you averaging? The item from this column. It's kind of confusing, so let me go back, but that's the heart of what we're doing. We're averaging something if a condition is true, and the condition would be a cell from C2 through C17, and we're checking each one of those to see if they contain this item, dog, if it contains a DOG. If it does, then what we actually average is the number here. Okay, so you're going to have three things in the average if. You're going to have the range of cells that you're looking in to see if the condition is true. And then the condition has to be right here, DOG or whatever it happens to be. And then you have to know the column where the number is that you're going to be including in the average. You see those three things? So that's kind of the heart of what you're doing here. All right, I'm going to escape out of that, and I want to go down and discuss what we found. So if you look at this, so far at least, it shows what? What would you say when you look at this data summary? I mean, that's the whole purpose here, is to help us answer a question. I would say that it looks like from this data, it's very limited data, but looking at it for this data, it looks like dog owners are substantially older, or at least 10 years older, than other animal owners. So we'll have to see. This is a limited study. I mean, right? And it's not very scientific. We haven't really done all the stuff we really should do if we really wanted a good answer. And there's actually some better statistics that we could use as well to determine if it's really significantly different. And remember, there's all sorts of other things that go into doing research. And that is, for example, we need to control for things like, if this will mainly be college students that are answering this responding to the survey. So college students may not own pets as much as other, or they may own other types of pets than older people. So you need to make sure you control for things like that so that you don't just say, oh, well, um, dog owners are always older. Well, maybe in college age kids, right? Dog owners might be older, but this may not apply to the general population. Maybe in Texas or maybe in California, this is true. You have to qualify what it is that you're actually presenting here. Got to always get your numbers correct to make sure that you're actually doing a good survey. All right. So what I want you to do for this assignment is to basically put some numbers in here, but not normal numbers. You have to put formulas in here. So at the bottom of your spreadsheet, it should look something like, I didn't mean to do that because you might have seen the formula, but it should be blank right here, right? And you need to put a formula in right here, and a formula in right here, and a formula here, and a formula here. Now, in this case, let me explain the concept here. I want to know the number of number of respondents who are living in an apartment. And I want to know the number of people who are living in a house. We didn't give them a chance. We did also have other, so we might could add other here. I'm not going to make that required right now, but we could figure out the number of respondents that, let's do add other. Let's do add other. And I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to put a little border around it so it looks good. So those are the three things that we ask people. And now we're not really worried about pets right now. I would like maybe later on to come back in and say, are dog owners more likely to live in an apartment? Or are apartment owners more likely to have dogs or cats? That's kind of where we were going with this. But for now, all you're doing is really telling me how many live in an apartment, how many live in a house, and how many live other. And then I want to see if the age of the person varies by where they live. So, would you think that an apartment dweller would be younger or older than a person who lives in a house? There's a lot of things that might influence that. Younger people probably haven't saved up enough money to buy a house. On the other hand, a lot of college age kids obviously are living at home with mom and dad. So maybe a better choice or a different kind of question might have helped us answer the question a little better. Maybe we should have asked, "Are you living at home or living outside? Are you living with your parents or other relatives? Or are you living?" On your own or something like that. Also, interesting stuff might be, well, do you have any roommates? Because that will determine whether you can afford a house and things like that. So, but we're not going to get into the weeds on all of that. I just want you to tell me how many people are in an apartment and what is the average age of the apartment dwellers. So looking at this, remember here, up here for the dogs, we looked in C2 through C17 to see if that was equal to a dog, right? Well, obviously you can't do C2 through 17. We're not looking in C. We're not looking in C, column C. We're going to be looking in where? Well, this is a little hidden, but we're going to be looking in column E, right? E. E what? Well, E something through wherever your last one, past your last one, as a matter of fact, would be. Well, that's where we're going to look. And what are we going to look for? Well, in this one, we looked to see if it contained dog. But in your case, you want to see if it contains the word apartment or apartment, right? Those characters. Okay. Now, then you can, if you use the dollar symbols on that, you can, like we did here, then in theory, like when you copy this down, if you use the dollar symbols like dollar, it won't be C, but if you use the dollar symbols here, then when it copies down, you can copy it down and just fill in the right words here, right? Okay, for these other two when you copy it down. Now, the average age of the respondents. This would be the average age of the apartment dwellers. Now, just to reiterate, the average age up here we looked in C2 through C17. That's not where you're going to be looking. We're looking that because that was what kind of animal they owned, right? And we're not looking for the word dog, but we're looking for apartment, probably, right? And this was where their age was. Well, in that case, the age is the same place, right? So you're going to be looking not in column C, but rather column E, and you're going to determine if something is true. What? If it contains the word apartment, let's say, right? If that's true from column E, then look in column what? It is going to be column D in this case, and include that number, that value in the average. Average it if that is all true. Okay. So that's your job. And then you're going to copy those down for these three. So at the end, you should end up with something at the bottom that looks like this, but which should have the correct formulas in it. All right. And then you submit that in Blackboard, by the way. And the way you submit it in Blackboard is you take your spreadsheet. You're going to create a link to the spreadsheet itself. You click up here and you copy it here, and then you turn that in. Be sure that this is in your BCIS 1305 your name folder, because I won't be able to see it if it's not in there. So and make sure the correct item is on the link, and make sure the link opens in a new page or a new tab as always. All right. Good luck.